Back here on the pig trail, and there it is, the front page of the Houston Chronicle. Will he stay or will he go? Obviously, Kelvin Sampson very much in the headlines these days, both in Houston and Arkansas. And we bring in Mike Irwin, our senior analyst, because Mike, that's very telling right there. I mean, if he in fact is still the top target, presumptively, you look at it as a situation where Arkansas is looking at a guy where Houston has offered him an $18 million deal over 6. Your take on this whole scenario?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of being told two different things. I've got a couple of pretty good sources that have told me ever since Mike was fired that what really happened was that Hunter Yurachek had started communicating with Kelvin Sampson back as early January, and that even Mike knew about that there are common friends on those two staffs, and they knew this was up, knew it was going to happen. And if you buy this line of thinking, there was nothing Mike Anderson could have done, even if he'd won the NIT. Hunter was going to make this change, that he had watched the workouts and compared the two mentally from when he'd seen Sampson. And Sampson, just a tough guy. Everybody knows that. He's hard-nosed. Felt like Mike was too laid back and was just going to make the change. But I also got one pretty good source with the board, and it's a totally different story with him. And he's basically saying that Hunter Yurachek sort of was told to do this, that it was basically an 8-2 vote, if they took it to a vote, that they wanted Mike out. And if this is accurate, and I'm certainly not saying it is, I'm less confident about Sampson, obviously. Because anytime you get a board which is being pressured by boosters, that's usually a disaster, because they think you can get this guy or that guy and this is going to happen, and then you don't get that, and you probably end up with some mid-major guy that most Razorback fans have never even heard of. That's certainly what happened with the football hire. But I don't know that that's accurate. I got more sources on one than the other, and there's a lot of smoke there with regard to Sampson. The question is, what's he going to do? And is he, and there's a new term that's come out of this, you can call it malzahn, gust. Is he gussing Hunter Yurachek or malzahning him, trying to get more money? I will find out.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin McPherson from hogville.net, our Hoops Insider. Kevin, here within the past week in particular, we're talking about so much talk about Kelvin Sampson, and what kind of fit would this be? Your take, just bottom line, the way this has been swirling in terms of the speculation.
Well, first of all, I got to put a disclaimer out. My blue shirt today is not a telegraph of anything that Kelvin Sampson is going to be the next Arkansas coach, but I think it is, and I think it's a great fit. Everybody I talk to sees this guy as hard-nosed. Even Nolan Richardson talked about how tough he is, but also his teams. If you look at his team this year, you go to Houston, a team that's basically been dormant since the mid-'80s, not a lot of success since then, and he takes it to a Sweet 16 for the first time in 35 years. But this was no fluke at the end of the year where they got hot. This team was in the top 10 in the country, 33-4. If you look at the Ken Palm ratings for defense and offense adjusted ratings, they're top 20 in both of those. So at both ends of the floor, they're well coached. He's a guy that if you can do that at Houston, certainly you could step in at Arkansas, especially with the players that are left over from Mike Anderson. I think Anderson did a good job recruiting these last two classes. Brand new team this year, one of the youngest in college basketball. And so only one guy's put his name in that transfer portal. So I think not only would the fit be great with Sampson, but he can hit the ground running if it is him by getting here maybe within a week of Anderson's removal and re-recruiting some guys. The grassroots recruiting season's about to kick off. It'd be very advantageous for both parties if it's going in this direction to go ahead and get it done. Now, there's a lot of stuff that Mike Irwin talked about, still some unknowns. Either this is a great smokescreen to help Kelvin Sampson get a better deal at Houston while Hunter Yurachek works through something else. But all of my sources have also said there's up to 95% certain it's going to happen. I've been around this long enough to know until it's 100%, don't count on it.
Yep. And, just to kind of piggyback off what you just said there in terms of the toughness element, obviously Houston brought it in the American Athletic Conference and then beyond, going to the Sweet 16. And really, this is the best we've seen from Houston since the Phi Slamma Jamma days. And you look at Galen Robinson, Corey Davis Jr., some really good players. But let's segue, Mike, got about 30 seconds on this. The baggage that Kelvin would bring, it's from long ago. So how does this play such a factor? Well,
obviously, if Yurachek hires him, that's the only thing that really matters. I mean, he's basically saying, I'm convinced that's behind him, and everyone talks about what the rule was. That rule that he violated came back when cell phones were first in play, and the NCAA wasn't really sure what that meant, so they put down some pretty hard, fast rules about phone calls, and he violated them, and he did it twice, I guess. The fans are another matter. I've been following this pretty closely on social media, and there's maybe 20 to 30% of the people that I see are posting, they don't like that. Arkansas's never done that. This has never been about what we are. So you'll get some pushback there from some of the fans. There always is pushback. And then what ends up happening is the new coach either comes in and wins or he doesn't, because that's what it all boils down to. Unless you get caught cheating, then it's really all about whether or not you win or lose.
Yeah, winning can certainly be the cure-all. We all know that. Moving forward, just looking at the pieces that Arkansas must put in place now, we know that the post play is going to be a major issue moving forward. Daniel Gafford no longer with the Razorbacks. We'll talk more about that coming up, and we'll also talk about how Arkansas collectively should build this roster for the 2019-20 season. Back with more after this. Okay, back on the pig trail with Mike Irwin, also Kevin McPherson. Let's bring in Kevin right now, our Hogville.net Hoops insider. And Kevin, when you look forward for the Arkansas men's basketball program, keeping players around, very tenuous time right now, not knowing what the coaching scenario is for the future. So, how do you go about this moving forward if you're Arkansas? Because clearly we've seen that Keyshawn Emery-Simpson has entered his name into the transfer portal.
Yeah, and you want to prevent any more damage on that. And this is a transient era of basketball at all levels, and we see every year just seems like it's a new record number of players transferring in Division I. So it's already a normal part of it. We've seen it at Arkansas. When you have a coaching change, players tend to get antsy. There's a lot of uncertainty. They've got a lot of people in the air. So it's real important that if Arkansas can move quickly, get the right guy. You don't want to rush it. But the hope is that there was a plan in place to not have it sitting out there lingering. Who's going to be the next guy? And Arkansas's got some outstanding players. Isaiah Joe, one of the best players in the SEC, even though he was a true freshman. We know that Reggie Chaney, Desi Seals, Mason Jones, Jalen Harris, a lot of young players. Ethan Henderson started to show a little bit at the very end of the season in NIT. I think Arkansas would like to obviously keep as many players as possible. And then obviously you got to find a replacement for Gafford. And Kelvin Sampson, if you look back at the arc of his career, he has done a great job, whether it was at Oklahoma, the highest winning percentage there. If you look at what he was doing at Indiana before he left there in really fast order. But I think the 5 years and the 6 years he spent as an assistant in the NBA, mentoring under Greg Popovich, Kevin McHale, Scott Skiles, I think that's something now he can add to his resume and tell recruits when Arkansas is trying to, whether it's frontline players, backcourt. Look, I've been around the NBA game in addition to what I've done on the college level, and I think that's a selling point. If it's Kelvin Sampson, it's so important, whether it's him or any coach, though, to find the attributes that you can hit the ground running with and sell, not only to re-recruit your players, but get on that recruiting trail. Like I said, the grassroots season starts in the next couple of weeks. Arkansas's got a loaded 2020 class, and there's still players out there in 2019 that can help Arkansas starting next year.
Well, let's kind of go to Mike on this and just get your take, Mike, based on the fact that, now you're going to have perhaps a different style. We do know fastest 40 has been the motto here that we've been used to for 8 years. And, just from a fan base perspective, looking at that, what potentially could come into Arkansas?
Well, it's hard to say how much that, but I don't feel like it was fastest 40, first of all. So I still think you're talking about a half-court basketball team this year. And I will go back to what I was told, that Hunter Yurachek saw these players, as young players, but he basically felt like they should have been pushed more and that they needed the toughness. And he felt that's when he became convinced that Sampson was the guy. If I can get this guy in here to recruit these players, make them tougher, make them play tougher half-court defense, make them more patient offensively, that this could be a good basketball team next year. I do think they need a piece or two added, minimum, and it'll be interesting to see whether Kelvin Sampson can do that. But just going with the guys they already have, if what I'm being told is correct, that Hunter Yurachek felt like that Kelvin Sampson could do a lot with these guys. Yeah,
and they were minus 20 points in the paint at IU in that second round of the NIT. But moving forward, Kevin, what are you hearing right now in the recruiting circles? Because you're on that beat every day. Raymond Hawkins, he just committed to Alabama. We know Arkansas was certainly on him, but then you get a coaching change. But what are the names out there right now? Because obviously right now you're in a holding pattern.
Well, there's a lot of names. It's really going to start, too. Let's just keep using Sampson as an example. If it's him, the players that have signed with Houston, in theory, some of those, if not all of them, will last for release, and he may be able to bring some guys with him. I know there's some other guys he's looking at in the JUCO ranks, a big man in particular, that Houston has been recruiting. So there's certain players that they probably already, like a staff, would already have their eyes on and we're going to try to wrap up in the spring regardless. Just like what we saw with Raymond Hawkins. He was probably going to commit to Buffalo. Oates goes to Alabama, he gets an offer immediately, and then he commits. So I think that a lot of things will be at play for Arkansas to finish up the spring, maybe even better than what would have happened with the previous staff, simply because when there's excitement generated with a new hire, and if it's perceived as an upgrade, Arkansas could be in great position to get some value in the spring that maybe otherwise wouldn't have happened. Obviously, re-recruiting what you have on campus, I think, starts there. We just talked about that. But I think things could play out well for Arkansas. But timing's everything. I really think if they can get this done in the next week, it's going to help them. There's a lot of good jobs still open, and so the sooner the better if you've got the right guy.
Yeah, and 30 seconds on this, Mike, to close. You know, the roster, the way you're trying to build it, obviously, Isaiah Joe coming back as the top returning scorer. You got him. You got basically everybody back. So, I mean, there's that. But then you look at, okay, you still got to find out who the next head coach is going to be, and it's got to be the right fit for all those guys coming back on the roster, and you really need to clean up in terms of getting a lot tougher in the post.
Well, I think we saw in the NIT, and even before that, I would go back to the Kentucky game. The last really bad game this team played was A&M at home, and from that point on, they played pretty well. So you improve the guys you've got here. You add a couple of 3 pieces. I think there's certainly reason to believe they could be much, much better next year.
Yeah, 18-16 for the Hogs in this past season under Mike Anderson, who closes after being fired at Arkansas with 8 seasons at the helm. And again, the Arkansas Razorbacks searching for their next head basketball coach. Mike Irwin, Kevin McPherson here in this segment. Alyssa Orange after the break with Otis Kirk talking football recruiting.